Hi, everyone. It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And tonight we are welcoming Greg Glassock. He's the CEO of Olympic Tactical. And we're excited about this because this idea to do, there you are. I was just saying that the idea to get you on was because one of our people said that she had something like a smoke alarm that she felt like was kind of strange and realized that instead of batteries in it, that it was wired. So we thought we got to start finding people who know more about security and surveillance. And so you, I think, came highly recommended from James Pete, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so he was our certified fraud investigator. So we're so excited you said yes and are finally coming on to talk about security, surveillance, and private investigation. So before we actually really get into it, can you talk a little bit about your personal and professional background and how it
sure.
connects
Well,
to what you
thanks for
do?
having me. Yeah. So I started out in law enforcement, and after a number of years in law enforcement, I decided to go into the private sector and start a private investigation agency so that we could provide a variety of services to business clients and individual clients. During that period of time, I also went through my own divorce, which turned out, unfortunately, to be a high conflict divorce, and one in which our child was sort of used as a pawn in the situation. And so, having gone through that, it gave me a lot more understanding and empathy for people that are going through those types of divorce situations. And of course, since then, we've assisted a number of people that are going through, high conflict divorces or rough ones.
Yeah, well, perfect. You're like the perfect person to have found us or us to have found you. So let's talk about the most vulnerable device and what to do if someone gets into it.
Yeah. Well, the most common vulnerable device is the cell phone because, of course, we all have them. They're smart devices. Most of us use them for everything from communication to banking, social media, texting and emailing with our attorneys, and with our trusted resources. We're sending out documents and receiving documents and scanning documents with them. They have location ability. There's a number of different, family services like Life 360 that works with WhatsApp so that you can track where your kids are. All those things provide vulnerabilities either to your personal financial information, your communications, private communications, your location, pretty much everything that is things that you could consider to be private or want to keep private.
So what happens? What happens if someone hacks into my phone? What do I do?
Well, so we have a cybersecurity company that we own, and the managing director of that goes through iPhones like you and I would go through tissues. He is constantly throwing away phones, throwing away laptops, and it really bothers me to see, what I consider to be absolute wastefulness. However, they are so vulnerable, and once they're hacked, it's very hard to go through and clean them. And so once he feels like a device has been compromised in some way or might be compromised, it's going into the garbage and he's going to get a new phone. So it's not easy. Um, One of the things that you want to do is keep your passwords private, and we can kind of go through a list of some of those things that you'd want to do to try to secure your devices as best you can. If you're an Apple user, your Apple iCloud account password is the most critical password you have, because if that's compromised, then even if you go to get a new phone, they'll immediately be able to get back into that phone and get into all those devices. So if you feel like your iCloud password has been compromised, you need to abandon that entire account, go and start over with a new phone, a new account, a new password, load up your apps from there, change all the passwords as you come in to new passwords and secure passwords. Now, one of the hardest things for all of us is we've got a million apps and a million accounts and a million passwords. And so the most frequent thing for people to do, of course, is the most vulnerable thing, which is to reuse the same password over and over and over again. Some of our hackers are very good at finding your password based on your account handles or avatar handles, and they'll simply set up a computer to run through 10 million possible permutations until they get the right one. So one of the best ways to set a password is come up with a simple phrase that you will remember. So this is something you're never going to write down, never going to put anywhere in writing. It's something that you can remember. So maybe it's a catchphrase from a favorite movie. Maybe it's something from a book, some sentence, short sentence that you can remember. And if you use that as your password with proper capitalization and spacing and punctuation, that is an incredibly powerful password that would be almost impossible to hack.
So it's not even just a word, you're talking about a whole phrase. Like, can you give us an example of something?
Well, so from a movie, let's say I don't need no stinking badges, right? That's from a movie that a lot of people remember. And if you use that phrase with the spacing and the punctuation, that's going to be one that's almost impossible for a hacker ever to guess. And so what we would do is you would use that as your prime password for a password protected app. 1Pass or 1Password is an app that we recommend all the time. They have both free and paid accounts. It is incredibly secure. And so you would use your phrase to be the master password for the 1Password app account. And then from there, you can load in all of your passwords to all of your accounts so that on your phone, you have access to that 1Password account where you'll keep all those things that you can't remember. But you use that one phrase for that one account that is virtually impossible to hack. And then if you feel like things have gotten crazy, you might have one email that you suspect has been hacked, you go in and you change that password, frequently changing passwords and not sharing them across accounts.
Wow. I mean, back to the thing about throwing phones and devices away, it's killing me because I'm a major recycler. Like, if your phone is hacked, isn't there some kind of program where somebody else can get your phone? Like, it just goes right in the trash. There's not even like you could give it to somebody else and they'll just get confused.
This is a rabbit hole that you can go down. So from a cybersecurity expert's perspective, once there's even a hint of it being compromised for him, he'll never use it again. I can't do that. I just can't legitimately feel okay about trashing devices like that. And so for somebody like you and me, we could take it into the Apple Store and have them do a hard reset where they're absolutely wiping everything on it and starting over. That is going to get rid of 99% of the stuff you'd worry about. However, if they had the iCloud account password, then it's useless to do that. You really would need to start over with a new machine, new registration, start all over. But
Wow.
hard resets can definitely help.
All right. Well, that's good. So hopefully my phone won't get hacked in the first place, but I'll remember that. All right. Tell me, what are cyber investigations and some other vulnerabilities?
Well, so everything cyber goes into anything that has data or is digitally transmitted. So we're looking at our laptops, we're looking at our phones, we're looking at often our televisions, um, now refrigerators, right? Everything is the Internet of Things and has some ability to be hacked. So all of those things have some amount of vulnerability, and it just depends on how serious you want to take it.
Did you say
Bottom
refrigerator?
line, yeah, right. There are refrigerators now that will send you a message and say, "I'm low on milk." How do they know that? How is that device being transmitted? It's going through your Wi-Fi to your phone.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry,
it's
keep going.
it's one of the reasons that 5G Wi-Fi has come up is because it's capable of handling all of those devices that we now have connected to the web. So any of those have vulnerabilities. Um, a way to look at it is the companies that invest most money in security are going to have more security inherent. So if you look at Google, Apple, those are companies that live in the digital space. They spend billions of dollars on their cybersecurity. They're going to do a pretty good job of trying to protect you. A company that makes a device, say out of China, that is selling it has Wi-Fi capability or Bluetooth capability, probably not investing a lot of money in the security of those devices. So reducing those things as much as you can or feel comfortable with, having strong passwords, and restricting their access as much as you can are some of the basic things you can do.
Wow. Okay. And then tell us about old gaming units and why those are vulnerable.
So, so one of the things our cybersecurity company does, they do what's called offensive security. And so essentially what they do is penetration testing for clients. So a company or a private individual will pay us to try to hack into their systems, show them where the vulnerabilities are. What we found is the weakest links are humans. Okay, that's the weakest link is a human being. So whether that's a phishing campaign, a scam campaign, whether that's we drop a thumb drive in an office parking lot where inevitably some employee will pick it up and plug it into their computer. Um, those are the easiest vulnerabilities is through human. But if you look at your family house, one of the biggest vulnerabilities we found are old gaming boxes like Xboxes or game devices that a teenager might turn on, play, connect to the Wi-Fi, leave on, and then not use again for years and years and years. So that device has not been updated with current security passwords and software, and it's just sitting there wide open for someone to get into your network, and quite easy to do so. An
Wow.
old gaming device. Yeah.
Now tell me about Apple tags because I hadn't heard of that before our first conversation.
Yeah, well, Apple, these companies are always looking for interesting, new, innovative items. And so the idea that you could put a tag, let's say in your kid's backpack, and send them off to school, and that way if something happens, you'll be able to track where they went. Or you want to put one of these in a vehicle to know where it's gone. Let's say you have a teenager driving around, you could put an Apple tag in the car and know where they are. What they are is essentially very, very small self-contained GPS tracking devices that use iPhones to track their location. And so an Apple tag, if you look up, is about the size of a coin. And it has a battery life of maybe a week. So one of these things sewn into a teddy bear, sewn into a backpack, sewn into a pillow or some clothing, or put into a car under a seat, would offer a particular amount of time of live tracking. And what it does is it uses nearby Apple devices to send the information over the internet. So it doesn't require its own service. Some child that's just walking around a high school, any other person that has an Apple device is going to pick that up and send it to the cloud saying, this device is here, this device is here, this device is here constantly.
This is mind blowing.
So this is a vulnerability for something like that. They also make an Apple tag that is like a sticker, and it's about as thin as an actual sticker. That has a much shorter battery life. However, it has the same functionality. Now, what Apple has done is if one of these devices is close to you and your phone is picking that up, Apple will tell you, send you a notification saying, we're close to an Apple tracking device. You have been close to an Apple tracking device, and you can kind of try to go in and see where that's coming from. So Apple has recognized that it is a vulnerability, and so they do let you know if you've been close proximity to one of these devices, and then you can go and try to find it.
Well, I'm thinking having been a high school English teacher, if it's in someone's backpack in a high school and pinging off other people's phones and those individuals keep getting messages, they're not going to pay attention to
Exactly, right? It
it.
just
They don't
full
care.
of information. Right, right. We had a client who had a reason to believe there was a threat. And so when this came up on her phone, we took it very seriously. And as we started eliminating the possibilities of what had happened, we came up with, during a period of time, she had someone in her car, and that person had an Apple tag themselves in their own purse. So we were able to figure out where that was coming from, but it took a team of us going through her life for a period of time to narrow down what it is. Now, there are other devices. This is just an example of the size, but this is not a GPS tracking device, but we use devices that are about this size that have battery lives of 2 to 3 weeks. And those things can be attached to a variety of devices, including a vehicle, where they will constantly track that vehicle when they stop, how long they stop, where they are, where they're moving, how fast they're going. And this would be a way to track a vehicle constantly for a period of time.
What kind of people, I mean, I already know one type in my head, but like, because obviously this community is largely like people who are dealing with domestic abuse and domestic violence, but what skill set would someone need either to engage or in spying or bugging, and how common is something like this in the domestic violence community, but also other outside of it?
Well, these devices are available online or in electronic stores, and they are perfectly legal if used in a legal manner.
Mhm.
So in my state of Washington, I cannot just put this on someone's vehicle and watch them. That would be a felony.
Felony.
Now, it would be a felony charge. So we do have domestic situations where one of the spouse will come to us and say, I believe I'm being tracked. So what we will do is go physically search their vehicle for a device like this that's either hardwired in, or sometimes they can be attached underneath the car with a case like this that has magnets.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll go search for this device. If we find it, then that gives us some evidence that we could take to law enforcement and potential charge to the spouse that's using it.
Is
In
there a way to
Washington,
connect it with that? Because I'm thinking of one client in particular that we have who found a tracking device on her car, but her lawyer said we don't have a way of connecting it to your ex. How would somebody put together a case like that?
yeah, you would need a forensic digital expert who can take the serial number, work with the attorney to get a subpoena, go to the company that is providing the service and say, we have found this on our client's vehicle, and hopefully get a subpoena for those records that can show who purchased it, and then tie that to an individual or a company that may be associated with the case. So not easy to do, but certainly something that you would at least want to find.
Mm-hmm.
And having that information in family court, the burden of proof is not so high. And so perhaps you just use that to establish a pattern
Mm-hmm.
of stalking type behavior. So in our state, the only way you can place this on a vehicle is if you own it. So this would come up in a divorce, where if I own the vehicles and my ex-wife is driving the vehicle that I still own and is registered to me, I could put that GPS tracking device on that car legally.
Mm-hmm.
Once that car is in her name, that would be a felony.
Wow. All right. How easy is it for somebody to do bugging and spying? And I mean, do you have to be kind of smart to plan something
It
like this?
doesn't it doesn't take a lot of technological ability, because these are designed to be pretty easy to use for the general public, and they are sold to the general public, and there are legitimate uses. So if you want to know where your child is driving, a
Mm-hmm.
legitimate use. If you own a company that has vehicles that are out on the road and you want to track where those drivers are going, that's a legitimate use. So they're pretty easy. Um, they're either hardwired into the vehicle where they can be running 24/7, or they have a battery life. If they're the ones that we use, which are battery and magnetically applied, somebody does have to get underneath the car and stick it on there. And so that doesn't take a lot of ability, but it does take some guts to do. And then every time that the battery needs to be changed, they have to put themselves in that situation again. So that would be a case where perhaps you're parking your car in a garage, or a place that has video surveillance, And so that if you do find something or suspect that something's happened, you might get a video of them actually doing it. But it doesn't take a lot of technological ability.
Hmm. Okay, tell us a little more about some of the clients you've had who are dealing with high conflict divorce cases or custody battles, and how you have been able to specifically help them.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the biggest concerns have been around tracking.
Mhm.
So is my spouse tracking me, harassing me, and stalking? Those are obviously criminal charges. Those are things that you can get written into an agreement or to a protective order to prevent them from doing that. So it might be going through and sweeping their vehicle for a tracking device. It may be sweeping their house for unwanted electronic video or audio devices. Those would certainly be a couple of things that you would want to do is sweep that area to try to make sure none of those exist. Beyond that, then it comes to your typical, are they following me? Are they making verbal threats, physical threats, sending me unwanted mail? Are they trying to set me up for some sort of negative action? Or are they making, a serious physical threat that would put you in danger? Those are the kind of ones that usually come to our attention is once it's raised to a level where that person feels physically afraid. And and in that case, of course, we're going to look at the digital cyber threats. We're going to work with the attorney. We're going to try to secure their home. We're going to talk to them about changing their routes that they take, their personal um, situational awareness. And then sometimes we'll be putting a protective agent with that person to keep them safe during whatever period of time it might be.
So I'm remembering an anecdote that you told us when we were on I think our initial meeting about someone. I think it was you who was trying to get away. Do you remember that and how you helped her get away safely?
Yeah. So we've had a couple of cases. Um, Being former law enforcement, I am generally pro law enforcement, but I do accept that there are some bad apples. And if you're a police officer, you do have access to information. And so in this particular case, it was a woman whose husband was a retired police officer and had a lot of networks, and she was pretty sure that bad things were going to happen if she stayed around, and that he was pushing her into a place where suicide or potentially murder was a possibility. She understood from doing her own research that tracking a person from place to place is not that difficult with the footprints that we put down with, again, accounts. You get an account for an electrical service at your house or a phone service at your house, all that leaves footprints. So in this case, she was pretty concerned. And, we talked to her about some of the difficult choices that you can make. One is to stay and kind of stand your ground and prepare yourself for the best and the worst. In her case, she really felt that it was serious enough where she needed to disappear. And in that case, there are some organizations out there that help people disappear off the books. And it requires a terrible price to be paid and a commitment because that person really needs to cut all ties with their past, all ties with their family. Anytime that you reconnect with a family member, then you make yourself vulnerable again. There's name changes. It is a difficult path, but for her, that was the choice she made, and she did that. And of course, once she enters that system, I have no idea where she is now, but I have to believe that she's doing well.
Yeah. I mean, you only hear about these kinds of things on TV or in the movies. It's hard to imagine that people actually have to do something like that.
It is, and it's unfortunate that it occurs, but it does occur, and we've had some cases here in Washington that were just horrible, and once you hear about those, you know that they're possible. Um, you have to really measure: is this just possible or is it probable? And that's one of the things we try to help suss out is the differences between a possibility and a probability. And so almost anything is possible, but it takes a lot of finances, a lot of motivation. They're putting themselves at risk if they really want to come after you. And so most of those things are possible, but probably not going to happen. There are other cases because of a pattern of events or a pattern of threats that you can see that probability starts to go up. And that's when you need to be more concerned about, a negative action happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I'm thinking before you made the comment about using police, well, someone who has a police officer that might be abusive and the danger. Is there any other dangers with using police for certain types of matters?
Well, the two that we have seen that are conflicts, again, former police officer, I have a lot of ties to law enforcement and still do. However, we do recognize there are sometimes when it is not the best choice. Those things that we see are when you're looking at getting an order of protection, a restraining order, that could go two ways. One, with a reasonable person, if a restraining order is filed, that reasonable person will understand that if they violate that, they'll be going to jail. There are serious consequences. There are others who are not so reasonable, and that is going to escalate the situation and make it worse because now the police are involved. They see that person is getting some assistance, right? Because in a lot of these domestic cases, the goal is to isolate the victim and make them feel helpless and dependent. And so once they see that that person is getting help and becoming more independent and is not so isolated, that's a threat to their power position. So that restraining order is one that we often want to talk through quite a bit before we go forward with that because it does have the possibility of escalating the situation. So that's one. The other is in small towns or small communities and larger ones. But in small towns and small communities, often everyone knows everyone. And so if you go down and file that protective order, the first thing that may happen is that dispatch officer, whoever else, may call the individual and say, "Hey, this just got filed." Or in one case, the individual that took the report from us was related to the police officer who was the spouse of our client. And so you just never really know what all those relationships are. And it means that you have to do a little more due diligence on the front end to try to find out who the relationships are, who are their friends, do they have good friends that are in law enforcement in the area, and so maybe we want to go about it a different way.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know we have certain clients that are like, well, mine is special because my ex is in law enforcement. And so I'm really concerned about that. So we have to take it seriously. Okay, so back to the surveillance equipment. So you mentioned something about a felony. What are the consequences for someone that does that? Like, what is that? How easy is it to get a felony charge or what happens? You said family court, there's a lower threshold, but is there any punishment if someone's caught?
Right. Well, so if you can get the attention of law enforcement and they take action and you can tie it to an individual and they can take it to the prosecutor and get them charged, in our state, it would be a felony to do that, which is more than a year in jail. So that's pretty significant.
Mhm.
And even if it's not a felony, if you're involved in a domestic case, just the fact that they're doing this is oftentimes enough to get the judge to make some additional requirements. So you can build in, there will be no contact, there will be separation of this amount, there will be no tracking of, there will be no surveillance of. So getting those things written in, it can also help to establish a pattern of behavior. And so oftentimes in these high conflict cases, it will go for some period of months or even years in the court before a resolution is found. And during that period of time, each side is trying to show that, I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so the more of these things that we can bring to the attention of the court, the more of a pattern it shows of who is being reasonable, who's being responsible, and who's not, who's being vindictive.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what happens if I suspect my home is bugged? What should I do? Because we get this question a lot. I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah, it is really difficult. We get this call too, and to do a professional job, it is incredibly expensive. We did one in a residence that was about 3,000 square feet. It did not have a tremendous amount of Wi-Fi connected items, but it took a team of four, 8 hours to do and cost around $20,000. So that
A
is the
day.
sweep.
That's
That
one day, right?
one day, one day. Yeah. And a professional sweep means we're bringing in portable X-ray equipment to X-ray the walls. There's thermal imaging equipment in. Every electrical panel, every light switch and an electrical plug is being removed and examined. All of the devices are being turned off and turned on to decide what's legitimate and what's not. It is quite a process to go through that. So a cursory search can be done by you. And so that would simply be going through the house and looking at lamps, light switches, pull the cover off a light switch, take a flashlight and look in there and see,
What does it
do I
look
see?
like? Like, I wouldn't know what to look for.
Yeah, well, you can Google spy cameras
Uh-huh.
and you'll see a variety of things. And they make fire smoke detectors that have cameras in them, alarm clocks that have cameras in them, teddy bears that have cameras in them, little tiny pinhole cameras, but you can see what they look like. And so just going around and searching yourself for those devices can be a really valuable way to do it. And you can save a lot of money just by doing a physical search. The
Yeah.
next thing you can do, of course, is go in and turn off devices. And you can go through your house and turn off all of your Wi-Fi connected devices. And then turn your phone on, turn on the Wi-Fi, and walk around your house with your phone. And if you see that you're getting a Wi-Fi signal in your house when everything is turned off, that's an indicator that there's something in there sending something over the internet. And you can kind of walk around to see where is that signal stronger and where does it get weaker, the hot and cold game. And then look around and see if you can find that device. So you can probably find 80% of the devices just by visually searching your own house.
I know when you were talking about the sweep with the 8 hours and all the people working, that it gives me the image of Ghostbusters. Is it like
That's what
that?
it looked like. Yeah, that's what it looked like. A
Yeah.
lot of high a lot of high-tech devices, and this was in a rural area where there was not a lot of Wi-Fi and internet traffic going on, and so everything we picked up we knew was in this house. Incredibly hard if you live in the city or in an apartment where you're getting signals from every other apartment around you, and so it's really hard to tell, is that Bluetooth signal coming from within this apartment or the one upstairs or the one down below? So it becomes harder the more tight an urban environment it is.
That makes me think of like when you're in a different place with your computer and you're trying to connect to the Wi-Fi, and then you see all the different options of the closest networks that you could click onto.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Someone,
Which is another thing that creates a big vulnerability is all of those free Wi-Fi spots.
Mhm.
Somebody like me, I never use public Wi-Fi, never on the phone, never at Starbucks, never at the library. I never use those because those would be a target for somebody who is trying to gain access to people's private information. And so what I would use is I could use my own phone as a hotspot, or I have a portable cellular hotspot that I use. And so when I go to hotels and I travel, I never connect to any hotspot other than my own.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so we got a couple of quick questions, and one is, are there things where cameras would be behind mirrors?
They could be. If you look up spy cameras, you'll see there is a myriad of different devices. Um, so again, you can check. We don't typically see those behind mirrors. Um, you could do that, certainly, but typically we'll see those either embedded in an object that you would not think of, or they would be in a pinhole. So some of the cameras that are available are, the size of a pencil eraser. And so we would look for that type of a thing in a wall or in a corner where it might not be noticed. Not typically behind mirrors, but certainly we know that two-way mirrors do exist. And so having one behind a mirror is possible. Again, you should be able to check by lifting that mirror away from the wall.
Okay. And the other thing is, how do you, I don't know if I saw it properly, but how would you get proof of that someone is recording you? Would you subpoena the apps?
Well, that is interesting. So if someone is recording you, well, if you find a device that you did not authorize, that is a good indication. Then you have to trace that to its ownership.
Okay, she's
And in
saying
that case,
from an iPhone.
no, from an iPhone.
Yeah.
Well, you have the choice to set those privacy settings, and then each app is going to ask you for those permissions. So you would need to look in there and see, had that been turned off, or has someone had access to your phone where they're turning that on? If there's malicious software in there, then it's a matter for a cybersecurity professional to figure out how that got on there. It could be a case of they sent you an email with a link, you clicked on the link, or a text that said, free whatever, and we click on that link and then it downloads the malicious software. Tracing that back to the origination is definitely not easy to do.
Okay, so
But that would require a cybersecurity specialist.
okay, so she's saying it's his phone. He records our exchanges and then sends it to the attorney, to his attorney.
Okay.
It's not his,
Okay.
it's his phone that he's recording it from. So depending on what state you're in, that may be 100% legal. Someone else said
That's
that.
correct. That's correct. In Washington State, where I am, we are what's called a two-party state. And so both individuals need to acknowledge and accept recording. And if it's recorded otherwise, then that is definitely illegal and the fruit of the poison tree. And so that would be something that you could report. And if they are turning those into the attorney, that would be something that would be illegal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she's saying not legal in California, and another person said legal in New York.
Yeah, yeah. So check with your state, one party or two party state. I think Utah is a one party state, which means that as long as one party knows, then it is legal.
Okay, great. All right. How does someone deal with email hacking and security? We've heard of Proton Mail.
Okay, so a lot of phishing campaigns come over email and text. So having a robust anti-spam, anti-spyware on your devices is a good idea. There's lots of them. AVG and Avast are two. One of my cybersecurity company people recommend Avast as one of the free ones that is pretty good. Beyond that, what was the second part of that question?
Oh, so
Sorry.
email hacking and security, and what do you think about Proton Mail?
Okay, right. So Proton Mail is a company that gives you an encrypted email. And so what that does is each side has an encryption key. And so if I want to send sensitive information to my attorney, I can send it via Proton Mail. And as long as both of us are using that, if someone was to be outside of my house or connected to my Wi-Fi and they were able to grab that data, they wouldn't be able to read it because it is encrypted. So Proton Mail is a free email that you can get that offers some additional security because it is what's called end-to-end encryption.
Mm-hmm.
We use oftentimes, like we use a Signal is an app for texting. And Signal has texting and video calls, and voicemail calls, and group calls. It is end-to-end encrypted. You can also set it up with a number of privacies, so messages get deleted 10 seconds after they're read, like some of the movies, right?
Yeah.
In 5 seconds, this message will delete.
Right.
That's a real thing now. That's a real thing now. So Proton Mail is just a more highly secure type of email. Again, the most basic thing you can do is change those emails frequently. Change the passwords to your emails frequently.
Okay, good to know. I'm thinking what other devices do you think are commonly used to check a bit? Like I was thinking, how about Alexa or Google Home or Next Ring? What are some things to really watch for?
Yeah. Well, again, with the internet, the pros and cons of it, we can look at these devices and look at their security protocols. So you can Google how secure is Ring for
Hmm.
Ring doorbell, and you'll see that they did have some data breaches where people were able to hack in and talk to people through the Ring, take control over the Ring. Alexa and some of the other devices also have been successfully hacked. Tesla, the cameras that they have on Teslas have been hacked. Now, some of these are easier than others. Most of them, as soon as they're aware of that, start putting patches in. But essentially, anything that can connect to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi has the ability to be hacked. And so, again, those would be ones that you'd want to change that password frequently. Don't write it down. Keep it into a secure password keeper, and buyer beware. You know, again, companies like Google and Apple spend a tremendous amount of money in cybersecurity, and so those can be trusted a little bit more than others. You also have to read the fine print because they're often selling your data to advertisers, right? So you buyer beware is do the research, but changing your password and limiting the number of devices that you use with critical information is probably the best you can do.
Okay, good. All right. So we got a question earlier today from a client, and I was like, perfect timing because I'm going to talk to you tonight. And I said I would ask it. So she said she was worried that she was being hacked. She went into her iCloud and she saw that there were devices she didn't recognize that were connected to her device. So she immediately deleted them. But then she wondered if it would have been better not to have done this to be able to prove that she had been hacked. So is it bad advice to delete potential suspicious devices?
I guess it depends on where you are in your legal strategy.
She's in the
And
middle of
so,
it, of course.
so in that case, it might have been best to to put that device in a Faraday bag, which is something that will block all signals, and then get that to her attorney
Hmm.
so they can maintain that as evidence, and then have a cybersecurity expert go through it. That might have been the quote unquote best thing that they could have done.
Hmm.
At this time, simply deleting those things and changing passwords, also may have limited the vulnerability and the risk to their data. So yeah, maybe putting it in a Faraday bag and getting it to an attorney and directing them to engage a cybersecurity company to investigate that might have been the best thing to do. However, deleting those accounts may have saved them even more of a breach. So
Yeah.
kind of,
She said
yeah.
she looked up what to do and it said delete the devices. And then she thought, oh no. And the other thing she asked is, so once a device is removed, is there a way to go back and historically look at the deleted devices?
Yeah, so with most devices, it's going to keep a record of that. So if I have an app on my phone and I install it and then I go in and uninstall it, that data is in there, that metadata is in there. It's often not something that you and I can just see, but a forensic digital expert can do that. They would take a mirror image of your entire phone, and then they can go through it and look for that data. So it is likely that the evidence of that app being uploaded, some of the metadata behind that, like the time and the date and maybe the IP address, could still be there.
Okay, that's good. So, all right. And then we just got another question. How can you tell if you have a tracker on your car? GPS tracker on the car or tracking device?
You'd have to look for it. Unless you have some suspicious reason to believe that someone is following you or tracking you, you'd have to look for it because the GPS often are passive, and so they'll only send off information at certain amounts of time. So some of them are set so it will only send a message after the vehicle has been stopped for 2 minutes or 30 minutes, and it'll send out a short burst of information saying, hey, this car has been stopped at this location for this period of time. So you'd have to look for it. You could take it to an auto body shop or an auto shop perhaps, and ask them to search for it.
Mhm.
The common places are either in like a magnet that's underneath the body, or it's being plugged into the car's computer, either underneath the dash or in the engine bay. And
Mhm.
so you take it to an auto expert and ask them to search for it.
Yeah, that's what we've heard. That's helpful. All right. What about if someone calls a tech security firm to check for bugs or cameras? What if it's the very company that installed it? So say my ex was the one who did it, and then I'm calling, and then they're the ones who put it into what happens?
Well, if you find a legitimate, and that's kind of a hard thing, but if you find a legitimate cybersecurity company, they're not going to be the ones that are installing surreptitious devices because it's illegal.
Uh-huh.
So the people that would be installing are likely the the suspects, the bad guys themselves, or someone who is, quasi legitimate investigator or professional. So if you go and maybe take a recommendation from attorney or do a search for a cybersecurity company and you see that they have an excellent reputation, chances are they are not going to be the ones that have installed that, because they can't afford. Our business depends on our reputation, our honesty, and our integrity. And so I couldn't, it would kill your business if you were found to have planted something illegally. So it's very unlikely that a legitimate company would have been the one to install it.
Okay, so that's good to know. All right, so starting to wind up, I know you talked a lot about how one of the most significant things someone can do is to practice good password hygiene, but we didn't say that term yet. So just because a couple of people have come in late, people bop in and out of these things, can you just again reiterate what is good password hygiene and what's that great tip that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So for me, password hygiene means having an encrypted password app. So again, 1Password is just one of them that we recommend. And within that, you can store all of your passwords. But to get into that, you want the master password to be something that you will remember and never write down. And so what we recommend is using a phrase, a full phrase or a sentence from a movie or a book or something that you think is cool, some motto. It could be in English or some other language, and you want to use correct, punctuation, capitalization, spacing. If it's 4, 5, 6 words or 10 words long, it is going to be virtually impossible for a hacker to come up with that. So it's something that you can easily remember. So you could say, the early bird gets the worm, right? That's a pass that you can probably remember. And with that kind of spacing, it's virtually impossible to hack that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Okay, so lastly, how can people find you? And any last comments?
Um, we have a website at it's olytac.com, www.olytac.com, olytac.com.
Mhm.
We're in Washington State and in Oregon. And I guess my advice is just be aware. You can go down a rabbit hole endlessly. And so you really need to look at the difference between what's possible and what's probable. And to really hack everything in your life, continuously hacking it after you clean it, takes a tremendous amount of resources. And so you'll have to ask yourself, does the person I suspect have those kinds of resources and motivation before let yourself go down that deep? Otherwise, change your passwords, limit your devices, and you should be pretty good to go.
Okay, great. That's comforting after all that other stuff. All right, Greg. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share this incredible. I mean, it's like wisdom, but it's also entertainment because it's so shocking the ways that people can spy on each other.
Yeah. Well, it's today's technology has led us both to do amazing things like have conversations like this,
Mhm.
and it opens up vulnerabilities, and it's going to be an arms race as we go through. So thank you for having me. I appreciate being able to be part of this forum.
Okay, well, you're welcome and thank you again. And I'm going to post the recording in just a few minutes. So we'll stay in touch.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.